everyone, and welcome to our seminar for today. We'll be talking about building a sustainable brand. So just as an introduction, I am Babalwa Gova. I'm the founder at Majali Chartered Accountants. We've been in business for more than 7 years now. And over the years, I've actually seen the importance of building a brand that resonates with the people that you're servicing or the people that are your customers. And I've also seen the importance of collaborating with others in terms of building a brand that is sustainable in the economy, the African economy. Today, we want to look more at the different tools that you can use as a small business or as a business owner to build a brand that is sustainable. We've got two speakers with us that are powerful brand owners right now in Africa, speakers that are going to share with us their journey in building a brand, their journey in collaborating with others in industry, and how they have established the brands that they have. And these are brands that we know, these are brands that we love, and more than 50% of us here in the webinar today probably own one of their brands. So it's a really interesting session, and I'm looking forward to it. And just as ground rules, and maybe as a request from my side as the host for today, when you have questions, please just type them in the chat box throughout the different speakers. You can just type your questions in the chat box. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of each at the end of the two speakers, and we will then pose your questions to the two speakers. Then the floor will be open for your questions to be answered. So at any time that you want to raise your question, please just pop it in the chat box, and I'll be monitoring the chat box. I see we've got attendees, over 20 attendees now. It will be just interesting to know where you guys are joining from. So in the chat box, you can just drop a location where you're joining from, which province or which town you're joining from, so that we know that the BMF is represented. So thank you very much to everyone who is here with us. I am going to introduce our first speaker. And he is a chartered accountant by profession. He also holds an MBA, and he is a founder and managing director of Maraphones. This is an African brand of smartphones. They've got 6 different types of smartphones right now, and these smartphones are manufactured in Africa. And this is one of the few African brands that we have in the smartphone industry. And we are going to be talking to him, and he will be sharing his journey with us in developing the brand, in partnering with Google, in partnering with Android as well, and how he managed to establish such a brand. And one of the interesting things about this brand is that in a few months back, the president of Rwanda actually visited the factory where the Maraphones are manufactured. And that's the kind of attention the brand is getting. And we are going to be learning from him. We're going to be learning the different tips and tools that he has used and what has worked for him as a brand, and how we can take away lessons from his journey in order for us to build more sustainable African brands. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Sylvester Tagu, and he will be taking us through his journey with Maraphones. Thank you very much, Mr. Tagu.
Thank you so much, Babalwa. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, I can't see you. I suppose this is what COVID means in our lives today, right? So yeah, like Babalwa said, it's an honor to be here. I've had a long association with BMF. It's not the first time I do get to speak to BMF attendees. In the past, it's always been in person, which is most livelier. So like Babalwa said, I'm a chartered accountant, and most people typically say, chartered accountant, how do you get to this space from being a number cruncher to that? I had transitioned my journey a long time ago into strategy development, mostly strategy in doing business in the African continent. And for a long while, I led the EY and Ernst & Young Africa Business Center. And that's where I really hone my skills as a business developer or a growth strategist, as you may. So coming back to marathons, let me start with maybe a slight correction, Babala, if you permit me. Despite the fact that I've been with marathons from the start and leading the growth, marketing, brand building, strategy, and business development aspect, I am not the founder. The founder is a gentleman, a serial entrepreneur by the name of Ashish Thakur. So just that correction. But let me get then into the Mara brand, and I hope you can see. This is a marathon. You can see from the profile, slim, modern, and the reason why I'm showing the device is because it's very important. It's relevant in the topic we have. I'll play some video. I'll play a presentation of how we've created that brand and how we intend to entrench the brand. But really, branding is about having a connection and having a connection with customers. Necessarily, one cannot have a connection with customers with poor quality. So when we start talking about building a brand, the product itself has to be representative or indicative of the brand that one wants to build. And in establishing Marathon, the decision that we took right from day one was, we are an African brand, which means, most of you know it, right? You're BMF, meaning Black managers. And as a Black person, as a Black product, you have to work so much harder to be taken seriously, even in our own continent, maybe mostly in our own continent. And therefore, we took the view that marathons are going to be high quality devices, comparable with the top leading brands in the world. So your Samsung, your Apple. There's no cheap device we make. We decided we're not even gonna get into the feature phone space because we wanted to build a brand that represents quality within the African continent. So that association that people typically, unfounded most of the time, want to make about African brands, that it must be poor quality because it's made in the continent. We wanted from day one to step aside from that. So we built a state-of-the-art factory in the Dubai port in Durban, excuse me. And the factory is comparable to Foxconn's factory, the factory that produces smartphones, for those who don't know. And that's the view we took, right? From the factory itself, let it be one of the best in the world. It's actually the best outside of Asia, including Europe, right? And in the devices as well, we painstakingly formulate partnerships with your likes of Google and Samsung for the screens and other manufacturers of things like the cameras. You would know or might not know. When we talk about manufacturing smartphones, there are 3 stages, right? You design it, you manufacture the smart boards. So the smart boards are what actually determines how the phones operate, and you assemble it. So those are literally the 3 stages in the manufacturing of smart devices. Everybody imports one or a couple of components, a majority of the components, and you focus on the design, the manufacturing of your motherboard and the subboards, and the assembly of the whole components together. We, for the time being, are the only smartphone manufacturers in the continent doing all those 3 phases. And for us, it was important because we got into this business of, the impetus of the Presidential Investment Summit. And it was, the question that was being posed was, we're moving into this era of the 4th Industrial Revolution. As the continent, the first industrial revolution and the second, and we could even argue the third, which was really about manufacturing, passed the continent by, and we're predominantly importers. In this 4th industrial revolution, the view that was taken was, is Africa going to be a participant or again just a consumer? And that's how the creation of Marathons came about, to establish a manufacturing presence of smartphones within the continent. To say we're going to play, and we're going to play in the high quality space, because if you think about it, if you think about the 4th industrial revolution, we typically interact with it as human beings, that is, through our smart devices, be it your smartwatch, be it your wearables, and but most people is actually the smartphones, some of the tablets. I have friends today who open their cars with their smartphone, those who drive the fancy BMs, and open their garages with their smartphone, check their home automation with their smartphone, check how their factory is operating on their smartphone, what are the levels of the chemicals, the storage, control, the automated warehouses on their smartphone. So the smart devices is really the way humans are going to interact going forward with the food industrial revolution. And that's why we thought, if we're going to participate, let's participate in that space where every consumer touches the food industrial revolution. So let me take you through how we've presented Marathons as a brand and how we intend to entrench that brand within the continent. I'm going to share my screen and take you very quickly through a presentation, and then I'll speak more about the Mara brand as we go along. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, cool, thank you. Let's play that.
Made by Mzansi. Made by the dust, the speed, the gold, and...
Apologies for that.
Made by Mzansi. Made by the dust, the speed, the gold, and the glory. Made by those too shy to face their crush, but not too shy to face their crush. Made by freedom and all its foods. Freedom of speech, of movement, of belief, and the freedom to be whoever you want to be. Made by Black Twitter. Fees must fall, racism must fall, loneliness must fall, overstay must fall, and sometimes drinks must fall. Made by future superstars, those with stars named after them, pop stars, dickies and all-stars, stargazers, and that star that lit up the universe. Made by the hustlers and sweet talkers, those who keep knocking on doors, those who break down doors, and those who build them. Made by the fourth industrial revolution, superior technological know-how, world-class excellence, and world-class thinkers. Made by those who love to connect, to laugh, to talk, to ask questions, take risks, and compete on a global stage. Made by Mama Martha's early mornings and Bra Eddie's late nights. Made by Marathon. Made by Mzansi.
So for us then, it's really about stickability of the brand, right? So the people, our customers, need to look at a brand and say, this belongs to us, made by Mzansi, it's made by us, right? And in our view, that's how you get a brand to endure, to become sustainable. The people need to feel like it belongs to them, that this is theirs. It's not somebody coming to impose something on us. It's something we aspire to have. It's part of us. We own it, right? So that's the whole brand aspect of Marathons. That's what we intend to create within the market. To say, and if I take you further into the presentation there. So if I take you further into the presentation, right? You would see made by Mzansi, the same thing continues. And once we start printing it, I'll just rush a bit further through this. It's so that once you pick up the device, you identify with it, right? Be it in a billboard, be it in your shopping center, it must always look local. You see the images we use, always local images. People, your day-to-day individuals that you come to interact with. Right, so these are some of the examples of what the outdoor, for example, would look like, right? For argument's sake, the billboard that you would find in Braamfontein would say made by Braam. So the people in Braamfontein identify to that phone as though it was made there in Braamfontein, right? And that's a visibility of what it would look like. And you go further into, as we change neighborhood, you go further into Johannesburg, you say made in Jozi. And you see the billboard over there overlooking the city, right? And even in the point of sale, similar aspect, always made by. And that's the team we want to go with, right? so that once you say it, in your colloquial speaking, in everybody's existence, it's applicable to them. It belongs to them. It's made by the people inside whichever shop this happens to be. It's made by if it's in Santon, it's made by Santon, right? And for us, that made by is a team that runs across every single platform we use to exhibit the devices, to attract customers to the devices. That team of made by Mzansi, by the shopaholics, right, is what we want to have in there. And let me play you a bit of what would be a radio ad, and then I think I would go to let. Apologies there, I'm just having difficulties playing the video, but let's carry on with that team. Right, so even the individual, so like if we put it there, if we see how it's advertising, it's made by Sia, it's made by Megan, it's made by Table. And obviously, the point you want to make with it in every platform is that stickability, the stickability of the brand that says this brand belongs to us. It belongs to everybody who is utilizing it. It's not a foreign brand coming into you. It's a brand that belongs to the people. And for us, the reason for that is it's not just that we are locally manufactured. Of course, we are locally manufactured. It's not just the fact that we're creating local jobs, because at the end of the day, consumers really, for lack of a better word, are funny, right? Consumers actually want to feel that this brand or this whatever is it that they're buying adds value to their lives. And it's an emotional decision. All the studies have shown that consumers, as much as they might need a device or they might need a product, once it comes to that purchasing decision at the point of sale when they need to buy, it's typically an emotional decision. And for us, in creating a brand that becomes sustainable, is to create that emotional attachment to it. So whomever is going out there to go buy a device should be thinking of marathons, because why? It's made by me. It's made by my community. It belongs to us. And that team, for a brand to become stickable, to become memorable and be sustainable, it needs to run through, it needs to carry through, right? So typically, some of the common mistakes that people get to do in branding is to create stories that don't tie in, right? So even something as simple as your aftercare, your customer care, must tie in with that same brand you're trying to create. Argument's sake, ours is made in Mzansi, made by Sia, made by Bramfontein. You now call the call center after you've bought a Mara device, and for whatever reason you have an issue with it, you're trying to set it up or something fails, because that can happen, right? You call the call center to have help, and you don't get that same feeling that this is local. You get some foreign accent based in, I don't know where, India or Croatia, answering the call center. I can't understand you, and you can't get the same service. That would degrade the brand. So for us, all of that, including the aftercare, carries on in that made in Mzansi. Everything needs to be localized. And for us, that localization then still has to carry through in terms of our supply chain. We're early days in our business, but what we're trying to do is to also localize the value chain. So things like the packaging, it's what a marathon in the box will look like. And this is our top of the range right now, the Z1. And you want even this packaging to start being manufactured locally. You want even the cover of the phone. Our phones come with screen covers and back covers. We get those made locally. And for us, the next step is to collaborate with other participants in the industry, argument's sake, battery manufacturers, for this also to start being manufactured locally, so that even our supply and our value chain is localized, such that, you know, not just the advertising says made in Mzansi, not just our factory is found in Durban or made in Mzansi, but even our suppliers are also local. And that for us create a stickability of the brand, which would make the brand then more sustainable. I don't know how I'm doing on time. Am I still good on time, Babalwa?
Yes, you're still good on time. We've got 10 more minutes.
Lovely. So in terms of the brand and the branding there, it carries on again with even your employees, right? Some of the mistake that organizations do is you're trying to create this great brand out there, but your employees don't feel ownership of the brand. Your employees don't even consume, have not been given the opportunity to be consumers of the brand. They can be true ambassadors. How do you create true ambassadors of customers when your employees themselves are not true ambassadors? Because employees have families, they have friends, and they're the most passionate representative, or potentially the most passionate representative of the brand. And if they've never experienced the brand as a consumer, i.e. utilizing a marathon, you know, or i.e. utilizing whatever it is that you make, how can they then go and be advocates out there to say, oh, this is beautiful, this is how it works? And typically in the community, let's say, you know, our community is Durban. That's where most of our operators, the people, the engineers and the technicians who actually make the phone live. And their neighbors, if their neighbors have managed to buy a marathon, right? Who do you think the first person they would call if they have an issue? Even if it's something as simple as to say, how do I do a screen grab on the phone? If they know an employee from Marathon, that's the first person they will contact, right? And for us, you need to create then that internal branding, that strong internal branding where the employees themselves love the devices and are advocate of the devices, know how to utilize it, and are going out there all the time talking about it. So if I were to summarize, right, in terms of creating a true and durable and sustainable brand, it needs to first be marketed. So your consumers need to know, what does this brand stand for? And that message needs to be coherent and consistent across all platforms. The second part is your supply chain. The people who supply you needs to be part of that same value chain, right? So I cannot be saying I'm a local manufacturer and I'm proud of local, and I don't employ local staff. I don't utilize local suppliers, because then you're not creating advocate, right? Because another part of, you know, extending a brand and making a brand sustainable is advocacy. And then the most important part, actually, the employees. The employees have to be the number one, you know, owners and believers of that brand. Otherwise, you're going for a hide into nowhere. You would always be spending money to try to create the brand. Because once the brand has been created, most of the work then should go in sustaining the brand, and improving the brand, and entrenching the brand in the minds of consumers, in the minds of stakeholders, because the stakeholders of every brand is always wider than the immediate consumers, right? It could be government, it could be unions, it could be whomever that comes across the brand, right? They need to feel like, wow, that is a great brand. I want to be associated with that brand. And that's what creates, in our belief and in my experience, you know, creates sustainability within a brand. With that said, let me yield here. Thank you for your time. I find it difficult rambling on, and I can see reactions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daku. Thank you so much for that interesting and informative talk there. You know, I love what you said when you said you can't build a brand with poor quality, because you want your brand to be of the highest level of quality. And, you know, in South Africa, we've had a challenge, or Africa, we've had a challenge where, you know, we don't get support from our African customers because they have this perception that an African brand or a service from an African professional would not be of high quality. And that is what we're trying to change. You know, the more we introduce brands that are of high quality, the more we get the narrative changing around a service that comes from a Black person is not going to be a high quality, or goods that you buy from a Black person manufactured locally won't be of high quality. So I really like that. And that's one of the takeaways that I'm having from this session, to improve and constantly work on building the quality of your brand and making sure that your employees are also your #1 ambassadors, so that even people who don't know about it will hear about it from your employees. Thank you so much. I have one question here that we got from the audience. I think you can help us here. They want to find out what Mara means. Is there a meaning behind Mara, or what was the reason, you know, for choosing the name?
Lovely. So Mara means strength. It means lightning strength, and hence you see our logo is a lion. It represents that lightning strength. But I like it. I get asked that question a lot, you know, because obviously we have this slang up here in Joburg, Mara, you know. And the answer is typically Mara, why not? Why can't we do it in Africa, right?
Exactly. No, it's quite interesting. I did not know the meaning of Mara as well, so it's quite interesting that it represents, you know, strength. And there is so much African strength, you know, in terms of the resources we have in Africa, you know, the strength of the people, the African humankind, you know, the Ubuntu in Africa. It all represents the strength that we carry with us. You know, it's also in our bloodline as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Taku. It was such a pleasure having this session with you, and hope you'll join us again for the Q&A later at the end of our webinar.
I appreciate it. I'll stick around. I will mute and turn off my video and listen eagerly to my next capable speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am loving the interaction that is happening in the chat room and in the Q&A chat box here. I see that Centurion is represented, Johannesburg is represented, we've got Roodepoort represented, Tshwane is represented, a lot of Tshwane representatives, Johannesburg, Centurion, also Midrand is represented. Thank you everyone who is here joining us. And if you are from any town, province, or city that I have not mentioned, please just drop where you're joining us from in the chat box. We'd love to know where each and every one of you is joining us from. So right now we're going to move to our next speaker. She is a managing director at Drip Footwear, and I think more than 50% of us own the Drip shoe. If not more than 50, more than 80% own the Drip shoe in our wardrobes right now. They have managed to build such a powerful brand in such a short space of time. And it has been amazing watching it grow in the news, in social media, but different awards that the brand has been getting as well. It's really been amazing to see such an African brand grow. And, you know, their latest partnership with Casper Nyovest as well. It's inspiring to see that, you know, a brand, a footwear brand, can have so many collaborations and partnerships. And she's going to take us through the Drip story, how they managed to build a brand in such a short space of time, and what are some of the tools and advice that she would give, and lessons that she learned from the journey that we as business owners can take back with us into our own businesses and look at how we've been building our brands and how we can improve the brands that we've been building. And if we want to start a brand from scratch, how we can go about, you know, creating a brand from scratch. So I would like to welcome Glenda from Drip Footwear.
Hi, Babalwa. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Glenda Njanzi. I am the Managing Director of Drip Footwear. So I had prepared a presentation that was going to focus on 4 main pillars, namely how to build a sustainable and competitive brand. Secondly, the importance of collaboration. The third pillar being what it takes to build trust with clients and potential clients. And lastly, how best to prepare the next generation. Before I get into the 4 pillars, I'd like to take you on a journey of how my journey started with Drip Footwear. I met with Lekau last year, 2020, in May, to discuss the plans and future of Drip Footwear. And at the time, there were only 3 employees, and those employees were doing literally everything. So they were capturing orders, they were processing, packaging, dispatching, and delivering those orders. And it was very, very chaotic and very busy at the time. And so when I joined, we sat down and we did a very quick and informal analysis of the business to say, this is where we are as a business and we're growing very fast. What is the plan for the next 2 years, the next 3 years? Because surely in the next 2 years, you don't want to be doing the same thing. You don't want to have a business that is growing but is not sustainable. So let's build the structures that we need and put the systems in place that will be able to run the business and allow the business to have continuity outside of the people that are employed in the business. And basically, we've been learning ever since. You know, we've been growing with the business. We've been trying to match the growth of the business with everything that we've been implementing, such as establishing and developing the new departments. Last year, this time, we didn't have all the departments that we have today. We didn't have the stores that we have today. And it's been just a few months and already we have 17 stores, over 100 employees. And like I said, we're still learning as we go, and we try to definitely match the growth of the business. Without further ado, I will be jumping into my 4 pillars. I will start with how to build a sustainable and competitive brand. So there are 3 questions that you need to ask yourself. Do you as a brand or as a company serve a meaningful purpose? Do you have a differentiator? Thirdly, do you add value to the lives of others and communities? Profit should never be the main drive, but the consequence of the above. So one thing we have learned throughout the Drip journey is remaining authentic and having an emotional connect with our audience. Our audience and the Drip family find resonance in our brand story and narrative, and that is because it's a story that relates to every single one of us. Being true to who you are is very important and very powerful. I'm sure a lot of people have noticed that Lekau has a very personal relationship with the consumer. When he is thinking of changing something about the product, whether it be the price or the product itself, he uses Facebook as a medium of communication because he understands that that's where most of our consumers are. He often does this by simply posting a question, and through that engages his audience and takes into consideration their wants and their needs. So I'm going to get into 4 points under how to build a sustainable brand. And those points are mainly to understand, secondly, to plan, create, and implement. So to understand means that sometimes I know that usually this is something that we've also experienced where we just want to go with our gut. And it's not always a bad thing, but proper research and analysis of your intended audience should always be the first step in creating a proper brand strategy. For example, there are many cultural nuances and idiosyncrasies that need to be taken into consideration. Who is the Drip customer? What are their likes and their dislikes? What are they talking about online? What makes them tick? I know that, for example, the way we opened our first store is very different to how we've opened our 17th store, because now we do more research into the area that we're going into and how we can relate to that area, how we can celebrate the culture or the province that we're going to open in. This enables us to cater to the people and our consumers the best way possible. You have to dig deeper and see what your targeted consumer currently thinks about your brand. Which messages are connecting and which are not. If your brand is new, Conducting brand perception research and competitive analysis is critical in building your strategy. You have to know what consumers are thinking about you and your competitors and what it is that sets you apart. That is where your true brand platform will begin. We understand our consumers very well. We know them so well because we have done the exercise of unpacking the Drip brand as a person. Secondly, you have to plan. What do you want each of your key audiences to know about your brand? And how do you plan to engage them? Consider the best channels and environments with which each audience will be most receptive to your message. Be clear on what key differentiators set you apart from the competition. For example, we've determined that core values, which are Drip, dependable, responsive, imaginative, and passionate, play an important role in buying behavior with our consumers. Once you address those questions, you will create the foundation of the brand strategy. Thirdly, you will have to create. Now that the strategy has been laid out, it's time to get the creative juices flowing. I like having the creative team involved in strategy development, so they have a deeper understanding of the context for the work we're asking them to create. This is where the rubber meets the road. Strategy comes to life through creative, and they must be in sync. The best creative in the world that doesn't build an emotional connection with the consumer is unfortunately worthless. Unfortunately, we see a lot of self-indulgent creative that doesn't move the ultimate needle of building brand equity and driving sales. My fourth point will be on implementing. If you have a solid strategy and your creative has been successfully tested, it's time for a solid campaign launch. Even more important than a solid launch is your ongoing efforts to ensure your message stays in front of your targets in a way that makes sense for them. Going back to our definition of brand, now is where the hundreds of perceptions need to be managed. You have to make sure that all of your marketing tactics and methods of delivery are authentic and resonate with what influences their buying behavior most. Continuity and consistency play important roles in implementing your strategy. My last point, which is measure under how to build a sustainable and competitive brand, is measurement is vital to success and should be woven into every element of planning. Measurement isn't something thrown in at the end. You should not wait until the campaign is over to evaluate the success. Using the proper analytics is crucial as you measure your success and gives you the right info to make necessary changes. We hold departmental monthly reports, which enable us to report on the ROI on some of the campaigns that we have done. Not only that, but see if our budget is well managed. I've seen personally with our marketing team how important it is to have monthly reports. I'm going to be moving on to my next important pillar, which is the importance of collaboration. We've recently looked into using influencers for collaborations, but more micro. I will not mention our brand ambassadors as of yet, because the strategy is exactly that, to be as subtle about the partnership as possible. Just as consumers are looking for authenticity, brands are seeking authentic partners to further their marketing efforts. Digital influencers have changed the game here. We know that consumers trust third-party recommendations more than they trust traditional advertising. So using influencers has allowed brands the opportunity to further develop meaningful connections with their consumers. What are we collaborating for, and what is the big idea we want to achieve from the collaboration are important questions to ask ourselves. What are we trying to communicate to our consumer? Collaborative efforts plays a vital role in administrating communication to consumers, and it also solidifies how like-minded brands can merge their different ideas and make it one big combined idea. We also need to know if these collaborations are long-term or short-term. Why are we collaborating, and what effect do the collaborations have to have for us? It's important to put in place what we want to achieve at the end of the day and how collaborations impact the brand. Are we collaborating to maintain a certain standard? Are we trying to reach a larger audience, either short-term or long-term? Or are we building a relationship between brands? And what exactly is the whole idea behind the collaboration? For the longest time, our collaborations have been focused on supporting other local Black-owned businesses. We understand that they have challenges from both financial and growth perspective. Through brand evolution, our brand now seeks more affluent brands that share the same vision and goals as we do. My second last pillar is mainly focused on what it takes to build trust with clients and potential clients. So this one is very basic. It's very simple and straightforward. All you honestly have to do is to live up to your brand promise, whatever that is. Ours is being dependable, being responsive, being imaginative and passionate. All you have to do is live up to your brand ethos and promise. Just to add on to that, I think that before we clearly defined our values, we were already living up to them. And so when they became clearly defined, it was no surprise to us. It wasn't something new to us that we now needed to adapt to. It was already something that we were living up to from the day we met up, from the time it was only just 3 employees up until now that we are 102 employees plus. It's something that is definitely something we've been living up to. My last pillar will focus on how best to prepare the next generation. So the key insight here is that the global pandemic forced us to change. We cannot simply go back to old ways of doing things that didn't serve us or those that we aim to serve. We've been educated to convince people to buy what we make. This is the one thing that needs to be radically changed. The time for change is definitely now. We need to focus on humanity. The importance of putting people first cannot be underestimated. That this is only going to be more important for all brands going forward. It is something consumers now expect of the brands that they care about. It's the next frontier of being people-centric. A key component to successfully put people first is to convert data into insights and then use those insights to create actions that allow you to foster more meaningful connections with consumers. That is going to be the new formula for success. Trust your instincts. While data has a time and place, sometimes you will need to rely on an instinctual feeling for what matters to people, to truly connect with what is happening in their lives. Ultimately, the better you understand your consumers, the braver you are, and the more risks you're able to take. We often joke around internally and say we want to do things the drip way, because the drip way is that, we make a lot of instinctual decisions. Not everything that we have done is done the traditional way, but we've gotten this far by taking those risks. Take action. For brands, actions speak louder than ads. Finding a role for your brand in making the world a better place will always be more meaningful to consumers than any ad. Moving from saying to doing it was a huge undertaking and a massive shift in how we see our roles and how we work. Lastly, don't go back to normal. The pandemic has forced us to reevaluate how and why we do what we do. We need to make sure that we're grabbing this opportunity to be resourceful, to be creative, and to be resilient to one of our core values, which is centered around being imaginative. And most importantly, just taking it back to our tagline, we want every brand to live their great. Thank you very much, Babalwa.
Thank you so much for this informative session, and I like how it is structured in points, step by step points of actions that we can go back and try to implement in our own businesses, in building our own brands as well. And one thing that I noted that both speakers are very passionate about or emphasize is creating that emotional connection with your customer, and that being a key in building a brand that is authentic and a brand that is relatable, and also it's a takeaway to see that you need to spend time understanding your customer. You need to spend time doing the market research. So we must put in the work. We are not just entrepreneurs that will wake up and sell our goods or sell our services to people, but we must put in the work in terms of understanding what they need and trying to obviously, solve the problems that exist in the market. If you want to build a sustainable brand, your brand or your service or your goods must be actually solving a problem that exists. It shouldn't just be, creating out of your own creativity, but it should be creating solutions to problems that exist and African problems that exist, so that our brands or our solutions relate to the African market that we're trying to service. And we are going to move into our Q&A session right now. If I can just ask my two panelists to join me again to take the questions that we have. There's a couple of questions that are coming in the chat box. If you haven't asked your question, please run to the chat box, type in your question so that we can read it out and have one of our panelists or both answer your question. So I'm going to start with the first question. How do you move away from the focus on price versus quality value you offer? This I find is more prevalent for brands created by Black people. So how do we move away from price versus quality? Because sometimes I think it's expensive to well, the perception is that it's expensive to produce a high quality product. So any one of my speakers can take that question.
Let me go for it then.
All right.
So for us, it's we put it quite out there that we produce high quality devices, which we try to make affordable. We never talk about price because we're not trying to be the cheapest. We might end up being cheaper or because of how we've managed our internal cost. But the difficulties with with trying to compete with price is that you might end up killing your own brand before you realize it, right? And not necessarily because you end up producing cheap products because you want to meet a certain price point, but rather because the incumbents, the already established brands, will definitely have bigger pockets. I could give case studies where even bigger brands have tried to fight on price and lose that battle. Because I think in building a brand, you have to differentiate your brand based on the, we call it unique selling points that you providing to your clients. I think the word Glenda would use is the value that you bring into to your customers or to your clients. And for us, we really focus about that value. And the value we bring is high quality, which we can make affordable through other financial structuring, but is high quality, manufactured locally, a device that is produced locally to make you, as a continent, as a South African, as a Joburger, as a Durbanite, belong to this food industrial revolution. There are a lot of case studies from business school. I think a very big one that played out in our background in South Africa was PepsiCo, when a decade or so ago, tried to steal market share from Coca-Cola and went with the price war. They lost it quite disgracefully, because obviously Coca-Cola was already established in the South African market. And there are other examples like that. A price strategy is always a short-term strategy that is bound to fail, mostly if you have strong brands, entrenched brands already in the market.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Taku. And Glenda, you wanted to also share your inputs on that question?
Yes, I think his answered very well. And I just wanted to add to that in the sense that we've been able to improve the quality of our shoes without necessarily changing the price, because we've also gained that trust with the customers, and we believe in really giving our customers value for their money.
Thank you very much for that, Glenda. I have another question here from our chat room. It's how important is it to have visibility across all social media platforms? Does this depend on your client base? So is it important for us to be visible on every platform, or should we focus on the platform where you know your client is? So how important is it to be visible on all platforms?
I think for us, it was very important to establish where most of our consumers are without neglecting being present on every other social media platform. So like I said in my presentation, that we usually engage our consumers on Facebook about products, about price of those products, but we don't necessarily neglect the other social media platforms. We still post on them, and we try to understand what type of consumer we appeal to on the different types of social media platforms. So I do think it's important to use all the social media platforms that are available, because we do appeal to the different customers.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Taku, can you share on your side how you've positioned your brand in social media, or do you select the different platforms you want to be visible in?
Yeah, so it's horses for courses, right? Like Glenda said in her main presentation, you do study your customers, and you do some form of a segmentation, and you come up with a strategy to bucks for bank. How do you reach most of your customers? At some time you might find that you need to be in most of the platforms, if not all. And at other times you might just need to target different platforms. So horses for courses. It always has to be driven by some market analysis, some marketing strategy. Otherwise, you'd spend all your time chasing advertisement, and there needs to be a return on investment on every campaign that one runs. Yeah. But remain available as a point of, so let's say a client is in any platform and they want to be able to, a call to purchase, they want to be able to buy a Mara device, they should be able to find it. But how you run the marketing campaign, you would have to choose the platforms driven by what your market research has indicated.
Thank you very much for that. And I think, we're learning that social media does not necessarily mean running ads and marketing campaigns, but it's being available on the different platforms for communication and interaction with your customers. So be available on every platform for communication and interaction. But if you're running ads because they cost some money, you want to make sure it's focused and it's directed to a platform where you know you will reach most of your customers. We have a question here. I think, Glenda, this is specifically for you and the DRIP team. How does DRIP navigate social media's negative impact on its brand? There's a long explanation on where the question is coming from. The customer now gets to choose which brand they engage with and have direct access to the brand. And so they are able to cause real bad harm to the brand, as was the case with Drip when someone accused them of shipping cells from China and branding them. How do you approach marketing on this type of environment? And if it's social media or through influencers, how do you reach your customers organically? Did you get the full question, Glenda?
Yes, I will refer back to it if I need to. I think that, like I said, last year this time, we didn't have as many employees as we do now. And the whole plan was to get the necessary individuals with the necessary expertise, I beg your pardon, to handle certain things and to establish and develop certain departments. For example, those 3 or 4 employees in May 2020 weren't necessarily able to establish and develop a marketing department, an e-commerce department, a warehouse, a finance department. We had to now plan towards getting those people in and building and growing towards that so that we are able to manage such things. So right now we have a brand manager who manages all our social media and manages everything brand, everything marketing for us. And I think in terms of choosing an influencer and making it organic, that's something we've struggled with for a long while. That's why we've never come out to say this is our influencer, because we've always wanted to be organic, because that's how we grew the business authentically and organically. That's why we engage with our customers to know how they feel about a certain product that we want to release, and the pricing and everything that relates to Drip. We are very connected to our customer, and we always want to make sure that everything that we participate in is organic, is authentic, and our customers do not lose touch with the brand.
All right, thank you very much for that. I think I have a couple of questions that are basically the same, so I'm just going to maybe consolidate that into one question. How do you get the right collaborations, or what do you need to be able to get access to collaborate with the private sector and the bigger players in the industry?
Oh, is that one for me?
Anyone can take it. I think it's just a general question in terms of how to get collaborations with the different private sector players.
Mr. Taku, would you like to take that?
Sure. So for us, because we in a manufacturing in a very specific space of manufacturing smart devices that have not been done yet in South Africa, there's a lot of need to grow the value chain. So we collaborate a lot with the Department of Trade and Industry and Commerce, which the department that deals with local content or local development, to coordinate and set up a forum in guys within the electronic space so that we start growing the component manufacturing. So for us, our biggest collaboration is coordinated through this department in the GTI, IC. And there are obviously other people who reached out to us via LinkedIn or direct email to say, I can make X or Z for you, can we have a conversation? And our policy is an open collaboration because the reason we got into this space is to grow an industry within South Africa and in so doing within the continent. But yeah, that's how we collaborate. We collaborate very openly, open sharing of ideas, and we sometimes even share our design and say, which aspect of this do you think you can produce? Where can you fit into that value chain?
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Taku. And it's very encouraging when you have, brands like yourself that are saying we're open for collaboration because we want to make sure that this is locally manufactured. So if we have people that manufacture any part of it, we are open to collaborating. And I think as business owners, it also goes back to this research and, putting in the work. If you want to collaborate with a certain business or a certain company, you need to reach out to them as well to say, look, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I think I can bring to your company. I'd like to collaborate with you. And that's how we basically, gain more and more network connections. You have to put yourself out there. You have to let everybody know what your business is about and what you are doing. We have a very interesting question here, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges that small businesses face, especially when they have almost succeeded in creating a strong brand. Once you create a strong brand, then the demand, for your product goes really high. So how do you create the alignment between the brand that you've created and the maturity of your company in order to be able to meet the demand basically of your customers for that particular product? Because often a brand grows too quickly, and that can have a negative consequence on your brand if you are not able to meet the demands when your brand has been well established.
I think that's a very good question. I stated in the beginning when I started with my presentation that although we had the plans for growth and the future to say we don't just want to be an online store, we want to venture out and open physical stores at the mall. The business growth kind of forces you to grow and match its growth, and that has been very challenging, especially because we are only 2 years and a few months old, and we've only had employees this year, and this many employees in 2021, and we opened 17 stores. So meeting the demand is very challenging, but it's something that we continuously work on. We work tirelessly on that as we develop and build the brand.
Thank you very much for that. And I think everyone here who is a business owner can resonate with the fact that you are forced to basically grow. When the demand is there, you're forced to actually grow to be able to meet the demand and still, do what you mentioned, live up to your promise, deliver on your promise and live up to the ethos of your company. So at every stage of growth, you find yourself forced to actually grow in a faster rate than you had anticipated if you were successful in building a brand that people want to use and people are consuming on a daily basis. We have our last question here, which is, what are the challenges that both of you have faced in building the brands that you have successfully built today, and how did you overcome these challenges? I'll start with you, Mr. Doug.
Thank you. A brief one on the earlier question before this. It's a good problem to have, they always say, right? When your demand surpasses your capacity. But at the end of the day, it's a problem. And I think Ms. Glanzi answered it perfectly well. In terms of the challenges we faced, it's really, overcoming that perception, the perception about if it's made in Africa, if it's locally made, surely it must be bad, right? And it's for us, it's been the biggest perception in terms of we operate in a regulated environment, so our devices needs to be approved by ICASA and by CETA and the operators, so your MTNs and your Vodacoms and Telecom. They already had, devices that were pre-approved, that have had long-standing relationships with selling those devices, your likes of Samsung, Apple, Huawei, and the likes. And here comes this newcomer that says, I'm manufacturing in Durban. And comes with an unfortunate name in terms of our South African lingo called Mara. Typically it was Mara. Why? Surely it's cheaper to manufacture in China. Why would anybody in their right sense want to do it locally? there must be something wrong here. So you have to fight that perception, and then with the consumers as well, it's always okay, it's locally made. So we took a view of being very selective. We have a retail shop, a flagship shop that has is Mara branded, and that's in Maponya Mall. And it was really to test the market in saying, come feel it, come touch it and feel the quality. And we're quite impressed, as soon as that shop was open and people were coming in to take photos, and because they see they made in Mzanzi, they see made in South Africa, and they see the quality of the shop itself, the quality of the devices when they touch it and they play with it. And I think for us, that was the biggest challenge to overcome. I can't say that we'll fully overcome it yet, and that's the biggest part we're still working. And the way we do it is to ensure that in everything we do, in all our devices, in all in our interaction, is quality, right? And because you can argue with your perception, which is mostly preconceived, but you can argue with quality that you experience. That's the only thing that starts changing the mind of the consumers, the mind of our stakeholders, a way to even get the devices into the hands of consumers. And we're making good strides in that. It's not over yet. I think it will be over when we have probably 10 more local manufacturers of smart devices based in South Africa. Then everybody would, I'm sure, truly believe that we can produce locally and it's just fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Glenda, on your side, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome those?
I think the biggest challenge that we have faced is matching the growth of the business. That has been the biggest challenge. I don't think we've rested since May 2020 because we constantly try to nurture this baby and make it grow, because you can't hand it over to anyone. You need to grow it, and the vision you have for it. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of testing out of new things, a lot of implementing of new procedures and systems that don't always work. And many people know that it takes years to build a culture. It takes years to develop your company so that it is cemented and solidified. And I think that we are on our way. We're on our way to that, and we will get there. I think we're doing well. We've come a very long way, and we're still fighting to get ourselves to a point where we're happy with our procedures and our processes. So a lot of fearlessness and a lot of being intentional about what you're doing. I think that we were doing marketing for ourselves for the longest time before we got a marketing manager. We didn't necessarily always know what we were doing, but we did it anyway, and it worked.
Thank you very much for that. And I think most business owners here would resonate with you when you said we did a lot of things on our own, where you have 3 employees doing everything from ordering to packaging and the likes, and you being the IT person, you the marketing person, and that's how we all start, as small businesses, and we somehow work our way out of that. And as we build the brands and become more sustainable. But I think, to the point that Mr. Daku made about the biggest challenge being overcoming the perception, quality as the solution. The more we produce quality work, the more we produce quality products, the more we give customers a quality service. The experience that a customer has when they engage with your business, that's the only thing that's going to change the narrative and the perception that people have that if it's from Africa, well, it's not that great. So let us walk out of this, session being determined to make sure that any brand that we build will be followed by a quality product. Any brand that we build will be followed by a quality service and customer experience that really resonates with the people that we're trying to service and the people that we're trying to sell to. thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Daku and Sis Glenda. It's been a very informative session, and I think also the attendees in the chat room are agreeing with me. You know, I've got messages of thanks here saying that it's such an inspiration. The presentations were informative. We really appreciate you taking your time joining us, and we really appreciate, you know, the gems that you've shared with us, you know, the life lessons in this space of building a brand, and how we can take those lessons, you know, to propel us in building our own sustainable brands. I like what you said that, you know, we need 10 more, you know, locally manufactured brands of smartphones for people to start recognizing we are participating in the fourth industrial revolution. So this is really to encourage us to do more and to dream bigger than, you know, servicing Africa, but servicing the whole world, as one of your visions was to basically be the best in the world, and not necessarily only the best in South Africa or Africa, but the world. Thank you very much to everybody who has joined in, all the different, you know, towns and sections that were represented today. We really appreciate your participation, and we are going to now end the webinar here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And bye to everyone. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and tomorrow let us implement some of the lessons we've learned today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.